all come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land. Here age relives fond memories of the past. And here you may savor the challenge and promise of the future. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America, with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world.
Welcome to Daps Magic, Disney and Positive Stuff. I'm Mr. Daps, and this week, unsurprisingly, we're going to be talking about Disneyland's birthdays. That is correct, not just birthday, but birthdays. I thought it'd be fun to take a look at the birthdays, specifically the milestone birthdays, through the years of Disneyland, many of which we've been at. And this goes back all the way to 1955 up through today. I guess 1955 is the original birthday. But we're going to cover all of that fun stuff. Before we get into it, though, I'd like to encourage you just to take a moment to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast. Leave me a comment with your favorite Disneyland birthday memories, whether it's in the park or you watched it from home. Doesn't matter. We'd love to hear from you. And then also leave us a rating and let us know how much you love Daps Magic, Disney, and Positive Stuff, and help other people find it and share that love of Disney and Positive Stuff together as well. All right, business is taken care of. Let's get into the fun stuff, which is Disneyland birthdays. And as you go back into the history of Disneyland, the first really big Disneyland milestone birthday would be the Tencennial. This was that year where Walt Disney announces the first Disneyland ambassador. That's a legacy that continues on through to today. Does a special show for the birthday, has some fun stuff that comes out, but I think perhaps most importantly, he sets the path for how Disneyland birthdays will be celebrated for decades to come. This birthday isn't just about looking back and celebrating the accolades of what has come before. It's also about looking forward and painting that picture of what's coming to the happiest place on earth. So at this birthday celebration, or during this birthday celebration, Walt Disney is not just saying, hey, look at all the great stuff we did. He said, hey, look at all the great stuff that's also coming, whether that's New Tomorrowland, whether that's New Orleans Square. So many amazing things that we love today really got introduced in 1965. And I think it's important to note that this is the point where you really notice that Walt Disney isn't just going to rest on his laurels. We already knew this, but this is where historically we can look and be like, hey, no, we don't just celebrate milestones. We also look to what the milestone means for the future. And that generally means change. That means growth. That means maybe some things going away and being replaced. But it sets a vision and a legacy from Walt Disney that we see today, 61 years later, as Disneyland's entering its Disneyland Forward era, and we see what the Walt Disney Company is going to be under new CEO Josh D'Amaro. And I think that's an important thing to note, because as Disney fans, we often want to stick with what we know, and we want things to stay the same, and we want to relive the nostalgia that we had as younger, maybe we were children, maybe we were young adults, whatever it was. But we want to have that nostalgia factor preserved. And one of the things Walt was doing in this 10-year anniversary was saying, hey, this isn't going to just be a museum. This is a living, breathing, growing theme park. Disneyland said, or he said, Disneyland will never be completed. And he was demonstrating during this celebration that, hey, we're just getting started. It's going to keep going. And we've seen that happen and continue to happen through the years as Disneyland has grown and continues to grow into the future, as we celebrated the 71st birthday this week. And as we look forward to next month's D23, where there'll be many more announcements about the future of Disneyland, the Disney parks and resorts, and Disney Cruise Line as well. So then we fast forward, and the next major milestone for Disneyland in terms of a birthday, I think, is for its 25th anniversary. And this is still before my time, but I would love to have experienced it. This is the family reunion. This is where I think the origins of the 24-hour day came from. I could be completely wrong, but this is what I remember. They do this because it's the 25th anniversary. You should, of course, have a 25-hour celebration. And so Disneyland is open on July 17th for 25 hours. They have that family reunion parade, fanfare of lights that get added to Main Street's electrical parade. This is the origins, I really think, of the more modern milestone celebration at Disneyland. This is a event-based thing as opposed to it being a Walt-based thing. And I think it's kind of when Disneyland is first discovering, hey, this is how we can celebrate these things in our own way, moving forward, and not necessarily completely relying on what Walt had already done. And instead of relying on those specifics from Walt, I think it's the pivot of starting to realize the core values and the vision of Walt and running with them, as opposed to just doing exactly what would Walt do. And that was a mindset that continued on for many more years. And in fact, I can remember being a younger Disney fan and still people asking, oh, well, what would Walt do? And Walt wouldn't do this and he would do that. And that conversation was pretty common, especially it seemed like in the 90s. But this was that first step to, I feel like, taking things to a new direction and a new way and taking some risks and going a little bit further forward than perhaps they had in previous years. And some of the ways they did this is they did have a TV show, which is something that Walt would do. But in this case, it was Kraft Salutes Disneyland's 25th anniversary, hosted by none other than Danny Kaye. For those of you who have seen White Christmas, you probably know who Danny Kaye is. He's that quirky, lanky, a little bit crazy, I guess you could say. He's the funny one. He's that tall dancer guy that's along Bing Crosby and sings "The Best Things Happen While You're Dancing." And you fast forward a few years, and now he is celebrating Disneyland's 25th anniversary and being the host of this show. Ironically, or interestingly enough, just a couple of years before he'd be hosting the opening of Epcot. But one of the highlights of this, yes, there's the Osmonds, Adam Rich, there's Annette Funicello. But I think one of the moments that's very interesting of this celebration is the performance of When You Wish Upon a Star by none other than Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson comes out of the castle. He's got Disney characters on him. It's a beautiful rendition of When You Wish Upon a Star that leads into this high energy Disney medley. And I think this is interesting because this is before Captain EO. And this is kind of that first step into that collaboration. And I would love to know the behind the scenes conversations and things that happened around this show that might have planted seeds to what would become Captain EO. Maybe there's a book about it or something. I don't know. I'd be very curious to see those connections and how they grew and what ultimately became Captain EO. And if there's any connections beyond Michael Jackson really loving Disney beyond that come with the 25th anniversary. The next big one, at least in my world, and I do remember this one, it's one of my favorite childhood memories, and that was the 35th anniversary. This was the Party-Gras. This you might have read about on 30 years ago at Disneyland on Daps Magic. Doug did a fantastic post on it. I think he did a couple actually. And this was just the happiest celebration. This was how can we just make the biggest birthday party and what would that theme be? And it really fit in with everything that was going on in the 90s, if I remember. But you got this wonderful parade, the Party-Gras parade. And I can hear the music and the song as I'm thinking about this right now and how much fun it was and how vibrant everything was and big everything was, because they had these massive balloon floats that were going down the street. And I can remember being, I think I was 9 years old or something, and just looking up at that and hearing and feeling the music and seeing the dancers and realizing how this was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. And just the energy and the excitement that came through all of this really was something special. And that wasn't the only thing that was special. Like, you knew the day was going to be special the moment you walked into the park. And sometimes there was a magical noise that happened as you entered through the gates. And that meant that you might have won something from the Dream Machine. And that could be a car, that could be free tickets, that could be pins. My dad won a watch, I remember, which was very exciting. And as you came through the click style, you were notified that you'd won something, and then you go to the Dream Machine and find out what it was, I think at a certain time, if I remember correctly. But it built that excitement and the anticipation that you already had because you're going to Disneyland, but it took it to the next level. And it really was something special. And I think that's why it deserves a hat tip in the milestone celebrations, as you look at these notable moments of Disneyland's history. And then you fast forward a little bit more, and you go 15 years further. And there's other things that happen through the time, but these are the ones that seem to really stand out, I guess you could say, through the history of Disneyland's birthdays. And you go to 2005. In 2005, you start seeing the change of the Walt Disney Company, I think is a good way to put it. It's where you start noticing the company kind of goes from being a family feeling company, almost like a small company, to suddenly something bigger. And the magic gets a little bit more polish. Maybe it was gold polish. You get things that are grander in scale and more expansive, and the synergy's growing, and maybe cast members are a little bit more less casual, I guess, a little bit more formal, not in a bad way, just in a like the standard that was already high was taken to another level, because this was the 50th anniversary of Disneyland. And this wasn't celebrated just at Disneyland. This was the happiest homecoming on earth. It was celebrated around the globe. It wasn't just a birthday. It wasn't just July 17th. It was May 4th and 5th. You know, the park was closed for May 4th for that media preview. And then May 5th, the world was introduced to Parade of Dreams, which, in my humble opinion, is one of the best parades that Disneyland has ever done. And then you look forward to the evening and you get to experience for that first time, remember dreams come true. And you hear the gasps of crowds as the fireworks go up all the way around the hub. And you get to experience Disney storytelling, both through the parade and through the fireworks, in a way that just hadn't been done before. It was bigger. It was more immersive. It was, it just was that much more awe-inspiring. They took everything to the next level, and even to the point of synergizing with the parks around the globe and celebrating Disneyland's birthday globally as well. And then you also had the gold vehicles, the ride vehicles, and you had the murals around the park that were amazing, that people sent in their pictures leading up to this big celebration. And then you could go find, oh, I'm in this picture on Main Street, or maybe in Fantasyland, or things like that. And it really was something that was mind-blowing and awe-inspiring. And it really did make you go, wow. And I say that because I remember as a kid, my dad would go to Disneyland and he'd study how Disney did things. And I remember one of the things he always said is, Disney knows how to make wow. Like, that's kind of what they're aiming for. And that was one of those moments where, as a young adult, I suddenly was like, oh, this is wow. Like, nobody can do this but Disney. And you see all of these different stories coming to life in Parade of Dreams, and whether it's incredible acrobatics or dancing or jumping on trampolines, there was so much happening. And it was just a beautiful parade, phenomenal music, great use of Welcome to Our Family Time. And it was a very big, classic Disney celebration. And I think anybody who experienced that, and especially were there for either May 5th or July 17th, will never forget those days. Who can forget walking in on July 17th and being handed those gold Mickey ears with the date on them, and the cupcakes that were given out? Like, it was just so many things that went above and beyond, from a hospitality standpoint, from a magic standpoint, from you name it. They went wow, and they went all in, and it really, to me, it sets the bar for what a milestone birthday celebration can be. And that continued on, and that led into more hospitality through the Year of a Million Dreams. I don't think the Year of a Million Dreams happens without the Happiest Homecoming on Earth, because it really did. They upped the hospitality level, and they really are like, oh, we're already this. How can we take it even higher? And then I think the question was probably asked, like, well, what's next? And that's where Year of a Million Dreams came, and all of that special stuff. And that could be a whole podcast on its own. But what we saw, though, in the 50th was kind of the launch of the modern Walt Disney, or Disney Experiences, Disney Parks experience. It was the change from just being Disneyland to being a part of a bigger story that's being told, a bigger experience that's being offered, and in a much, it planted the seeds, I guess, to what we have today, because it just had a much further range and scope and reach and all of those fun things as Disneyland celebrated this milestone. And this led to the 60th, which was 11 years ago, and 2015 came about, and there were a lot of questions like, well, you can't just redo the 50th, but what's going to be different, and how is it going to be different, and how is it going to feel? And Disneyland made the Diamond Celebration, and this was a different approach. Whereas I think the 50th anniversary was classic and grand and traditional Disney in many regards, even though there was some modern music and stuff used throughout it. The 60th suddenly was a era where Instagram is happening. It's an era where social media is a much bigger deal. 50th, social media was still a fairly new thing. YouTube wasn't even around yet. 60th, these things are now a part of our daily lives. And so I think the approach to it had to be different. It was a more modern approach. It was more interactive in some ways. There's more ways to connect digitally versus just experience what's going on around you. And maybe that's a 24-hour day with the Paint the Night parade, which was a much more upbeat and modern parade than Main Street Electrical Parade. But it was a parade for a younger generation. The focus this is really what it is. The focus had changed from being a whatever that demographic was, that's the target audience, let's say young families for the 50th anniversary. Young families were a new generation now by the 60th. And so it was more upbeat. It was a little bit more poppy music. There's a different approach to the technology that was used. The LED lights, the projection mapping for Disneyland Forever. The World of Color now is a part of this, and World of Color Celebrate debuts during the 60th, and you see a way of storytelling that builds on the past, but definitely is bringing the Walt Disney Company and Disneyland into a completely new era that's very technological advanced. And the thing is the 50th did that too, to another level. But the speed of technological growth, I think, as it continues to speed up and new things are more available quicker, you saw a bigger change in technology from the 50th to the 60th than you did from probably the 40th to the 50th, where yes, the 50th saw new firework launching spots and a much more comprehensive and massive scaled parade. But then you fast forward 10 years and you suddenly are doing new things with lights, new things with audio, new things with projections, and making these experiences immersive in a different way. Whereas Parade of Dreams, it's immersive because people are moving around in front of you and performing in different ways. Paint the Night, still performers, incredible floats, lights, and then you have a different type of engagement as you're watching the parade. And then you move into the fireworks in the evening, and the Main Street buildings are coming to life with the projections that are absolutely gorgeous. And it just changed the way the story was being told and the way that guests were being pulled into the story that was being told, and really showed a Walt Disney Company and Disneyland that was continuing to grow and change with the times that it was in. And this is a hard thing for us fans that, you know, I've mentioned it. We love our nostalgia, but we also love new and exciting things. I think most Disney fans will say that Paint the Night is one of their favorite parades. And that's a good thing, because we do want Disney to continue to grow and evolve and to excite us with new things and wow us with new things. And that leads to last year's birthday, which was the 70th celebration. And what you see this time is a balancing act between nostalgia and innovation. There's a lot of like celebrating what made Disneyland such a happy place over the last 70 years. And then there's also leaning into where Disneyland is going in the future and the new things it has to offer. I think of the Tapestry of Happiness, which takes so many of the lessons that Disney learned through the years, whether it's projections on Main Street walls or on It's a Small World, but let's add it to the Carthay Circle restaurant also. And so you have two versions of Tapestry of Happiness on It's a Small World and also on the Carthay Circle restaurant. So you get the new version of A World of Color with World of Color Happiness. You get the return of Wondrous Journeys. You get the return of Paint the Night, which are fan favorites and really brighten up the night with light and Disney magic, as well as the Tapestry of Happiness. But perhaps the most important thing that comes in 2025 as part of the birthday celebrations of the Disneyland Resort, or Disneyland specifically, is with all of these new things and these exciting things that are being celebrated, they also celebrate with something that's incredibly new, incredibly advanced and technological, but completely rooted in the origins of Disneyland and the Walt Disney Company. And that's through the audio animatronic version of Walt Disney himself in the new Opera House show, Walt Disney: A Magical Life. And I think about this a lot because this was one of those things. I remember going to the preview of this the day before it debuted. I think it was the day before it debuted. And we'd seen, I think, a video of it by then. We'd seen pictures of it. We obviously had concept art of it. And we walk in and you watch the show, and it's built off One Man's Dream, which I love that show. And then you see the Walt Disney. Like, you see Walt Disney leaning on his desk and speaking to us in the audience and standing up, which was amazing technologically, and doing his little twitches with his fingers and reacting to things and the glimmer of his eyes. And I remember afterwards, I was walking out with a friend and they said, "What'd you think?" And I just couldn't tell them because I didn't know. And I realized part of that is because I didn't know what it was like to be in the presence of Walt Disney. It's very different watching someone on a screen versus watching someone physically in front of you. It's very different, I would assume, meeting me in the parks versus watching me through a YouTube video or on a podcast somewhere. And it took me a while to really process this and connect. That's what I was feeling, is like, I just didn't have a way to know, like, I didn't have a way to balance out what it was that I was actually seeing and experiencing. I loved what he had to say. I thought the technology was great. The show structure is beautiful, but I just didn't know what I thought of Walt. Like, it really took me some time to figure that out. And now that we're a year later, it's become one of those things that I really think is a treasure at Disneyland, because as we're moving forward, this is rooting everything in the man who started it all. Great. But it's also a living reminder that Walt was always about taking the risk, moving forward, adding new things, trying new things, telling that new story. And this audio animatronic is doing exactly that. And I know it's controversial because there is this level of respect and awe for Walt Disney that's deserved. And I think that was honored in the way they did this. And I presume it will be honored in the way that they do the next version of him for the Carousel of Progress. But as we're looking at Disneyland birthdays, I love that 71 years after Walt Disney said, "To all who come to this happy place, welcome," we now hear that basically every year, one way or another. Sometimes they've played it over the entire park through loudspeakers in years gone by. And then other times it's like what we had this week, which is there's a cavalcade, and part of the cavalcade is you hear Walt Disney do that speech, and then they sing Happy Birthday Disneyland. And it's a cute moment that's very reminiscent of some of the old I guess some of the old Disney live action moments when they're coming up with that emotional, oh, we all came together and celebrated whatever or whoever it happens to be. But it's wonderful that as we are celebrating the 71st birthday this week, to know that some celebrations are big, some celebrations not so big, but they're all celebrating the same thing. And they're celebrating that vision and that legacy of Walt Disney. And one of the best parts, or he probably knew, but one of the most amazing things I think of all of this is that as it's moved through the years and as it's evolved, these different celebrations, it really has come, the 50th nailed it. It's become a homecoming every year. It's a reunion every year, or every time you visit Disneyland. And what the 50th did that I think was probably one of the best gifts for many of us fans is with that welcome home slogan and campaign that's continued on in resorts and places around the world, which I love. It kind of changed the mindset for going to Disneyland. Actually, it changed it from going to Disneyland to coming to Disneyland. And it really is that change of mindset from being a place you go to a place you come, from a place that's kind of over here that you go and you experience things and then you go tell everybody about it, to it's really now that happy place that you come home to with the people that mean the most to you, whether it's family, found family, friends, the friends you meet along the way. But it really is that special place with special people that get to celebrate the legacy and the dreams of a special man. And as I think about this, it's not just the community that's been built through the years around Disneyland. And I think some of these milestones definitely have been instrumental in building those friendships in that community. The 50th, the 60th, the 70th, all of these things, we walk away with stories and shared experiences and core memories that we share with other people that weren't there, and then relive with the people that were, that it's a special thing. But it's also it's a celebration of the people that make this happen on a daily basis. It's a celebration of the cast members that come into work day after day after day after day to make the world a little bit more magical, a little bit more joyful, a little bit happier, and they succeed in that. And it's a celebration of the people that are supporting them, whether it's the people that do all the behind the scenes stuff or cleaning or fixing or maintaining all of these things, or maybe they're the ones that dreamed it, the Imagineers, or maybe they're the ones that don't have some of the glamorous jobs. Maybe that they're doing the finances for it, or they're doing the logistics for it, or they're the person that markets it, or like there's so many different things that go into making every person that goes to Disneyland's stay or visit magical. And it couldn't happen without all of them. You need the leaders, you need the decision makers, you need the bankers, you need the ride operators, the entertainers, you need all of these people, the people that sell food, the people that sell the merchandise. All of these things are important part of the Disney experience. And I think the celebration of Disneyland's birthday every year is just as much a celebration of cast members' legacy and their contributions as it is of Walt Disney. I think back to, there was a few years where they were doing flash mobs. And so it was never broadcast, but somehow everybody always knew. And so you'd be camped out in Town Square waiting for this moment to happen. And one of the things I loved the most about it is this flash mob. You'd have your upbeat music and the characters would come running out. And it wasn't just Disney characters, which they're fantastic. I love Disney characters, especially in situations like that. I think Disney characters add so much magic to the Disneyland experience or Disney experience that nobody else can do. But among these Disney characters were cast members from Tomorrowland, from Main Street, from Fantasyland, from New Orleans Square, from Frontierland, you name it. You had cast members from around the resort that were coming out and being a part of that celebration and being a part of that moment that honored the dreams and the legacy of Walt Disney. And I think it's something that it's so easy to take for granted. You know, it's so easy to just go in and like, oh, the magic's there. The magic happens. I have a magic key. This is great. But I do think at least once a year, it should be every day, we need to stop and recognize the people that continue on Walt Disney's dream at every level, from Josh D'Amaro to, Adam on Main Street taking photos. And they're all fantastic, and they all have a critical role in making Disneyland the happiest place on earth today, yesterday, and tomorrow as it continues to grow. And it's important to know that as Disneyland continues to grow, which is what Walt always wanted to have happen, it will never be complete, which means it will never stop changing. It will never stop growing. It'll never stop trying new things. And some of these things we're absolutely going to love. Some of these things, they might be not our favorites, but they might be somebody else's favorite. And one of the things I have learned time and time again is just because it doesn't connect with me does not mean it won't connect with you. And I loved, I don't remember who said it, but they said, well, don't yuck on my yum. And I overheard them saying that to someone, and I was like, that's true. As Disney fans, we very easily can give opinions that maybe are less than glowing on things that other Disney fans absolutely love. And I think one of the worst things we can do is crush somebody's dreams, their inspirations, their sense of excitement and wow for something that Disney's offered just because it didn't give us the same feeling. Because imagine going back to that first really magical moment. Maybe it was the 35th anniversary, that Party-Gras parade. Imagine if you're sitting there and you're all excited about it and you think it's the best thing ever, and then the person next to you says it's the worst thing ever and you're stupid for thinking that. And that's just heartbreaking. I just don't think that should happen. And I think that's one of the reasons I love Disneyland birthdays, is because it's a celebration of joy. It's a celebration of the happiest place on earth, and people in general are happy. And I loved getting to talk to so many people this week and catch up with them, hear about what they've been doing, where they've been, maybe just chat for a couple of minutes and get in a quick photo. But it's fun to reminisce, to connect, and to dream about the future of Disneyland on its birthday. And I look forward to seeing what the future milestones are going to be, whether it's the 75th, the 80th, who knows what's coming next. And that's part of the fun of being a Disney fan and covering the Walt Disney Company. So as we wrap this up, the Disneyland story is nowhere near complete. It started in 1955 on a very chaotic day where, not everything was working right. Not everything was perfect. Chords were wrapped up and things just didn't go the perfect fairy tale story that I think some people would have envisioned for that first day. And if you haven't watched it yet, watch Disneyland Handcrafted, because it really goes into that really well. And it's, I think, one of the best new documentaries to come out in recent years. But you look at its origins and you look at people going, oh, that thing, that's not going to work. And then you look at how out of those chaotic moments, one of the most iconic places in the world was born and continues to be loved by now 1 billion people through the last 71 years, and spawned off so many other parks and resorts and a cruise line and so many other ways for people to experience the magic of Disney and the continuation of Walt's dream. And I love that the chaos and the criticisms about day one were just a part of the story, not the end of the story. Because how often do we have those chaotic moments and those criticisms levied at us? And we can either let them get us down or use it as as a stepping stone to something greater. And I think Walt Disney knew that, hey, this is just step one. We're going to keep going, and was driven to really make that happen. And so as we celebrate Disneyland's birthday, we get to recognize that. We get to celebrate the great things that come out of chaotic moments, the wow moments that maybe surpass those critical thoughts and critical words that happen. And it's a great reminder to celebrate where you're at in any given moment, because you never know what's coming next. But it's also a great reminder to celebrate the things that do go right and to really focus on those, because as we focus on these things, they're going to continue to grow, just like Disneyland's going to. And I can't wait to see what comes in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, especially hearing about it at D23 in a couple weeks. It's going to be great. So my question for you, I asked it at the beginning, I'm going to ask it again. What are some of your favorite Disneyland birthday memories? Maybe you were in the parks, maybe you watched on YouTube or TV or whatever. Maybe you watched that Tencennial presentation or Wonderful World of Disney with Walt Disney back in the day, or maybe you saw Danny Kaye celebrating the 25th anniversary of Disneyland. I want to hear from you what your favorite Disneyland birthday memory is. And if you go back in time, which milestone birthday, or maybe not milestone birthday, would you like to experience for the first time, or maybe again? But with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and I want to remind you all to make it a great week, keep kind, and we'll see you in the parks.